Some games seem hardcore simply because they punish you relentlessly. However, Road to Vostok gives off a different vibe. It is the type of game that begins to change completely once you realize that many of the best advantages aren't shouted in your face. They are hidden in the details. That is why in this video, I want to show you 10 hidden mechanics in Road to Vostok that can totally change the way you play. Once you understand these details, much of what seemed like unfair difficulty starts to reveal that in reality, the game was demanding your attention the entire time. I'm Matthew, and the video starts now. To me, this is one of those mechanics that makes Road to Vostok feel like a different game, mainly because shelters have independent stashes, and the game doesn't explicitly explain that the decoration mode can become a massive logistical tool. Instead of treating cabinets, bookcases, and lockers as mere decoration or extra space, you start to see each piece of furniture as a portable chest that can cross the map with everything inside. The most insane detail is that the path for this exists within the game's official system. In the shelter, you open Decor mode with F1, access the furniture catalog, retract the container, and then reposition that same furniture in another shelter. Since players have reported that the contents remain inside the container when it is placed again, this effectively becomes a massive loot transport system without the need for multiple risky trips carrying items one by one. I like this mechanic because it directly addresses the most tedious part of the genre, moving bases, and turns a boring process into a smart organizational decision. Since Road to Vostok separates the stash of each shelter, you would normally have to plan supply routes and physically carry equipment between bases. With this trick, you shorten that struggle significantly. What makes it even better is that it fits perfectly with the game's logic, as there are several furniture items focused on storage, such as cabinets, lockers, freezers, and shelves, all designed to hold plenty of items. For me, this is the definition of a good hidden mechanic. It doesn't break the hardcore identity of Road to Vostok, but it rewards the clever player who realizes the furniture catalog isn't just for decorating, but for completely mastering the game's economy of time and risk. Instead of wasting time entering the weapon inspection screen constantly, you start to rely on your own ears, which makes everything feel more natural, faster, and even more immersive. When full auto produces a higher pitched click and semi-auto responds with a deeper sound, the game practically creates a secret language between you and your weapon. The best part is that this doesn't feel like just a gimmick, but a skill the player develops over time. It's the kind of thing that separates those who just mash buttons from those who truly understand the rhythm of combat. Once you develop this habit, switching firing modes stops being a visual check and becomes an almost auditory reflex, which is powerful in a game like Road to Vostok, where every second counts. I really like this mechanic because it conveys a sense of actual equipment mastery. You know when a game makes you feel like you're getting more experience without needing an upgrade, a tutorial, or on-screen text? That's exactly what this is. You aren't just hearing a nice sound effect, you are using sound as practical information. And this type of design always catches my attention because it rewards attention to detail. There's another point that makes this even better. Many people use this sound alongside the weapon inspection. So the mechanic doesn't totally replace the traditional check. It complements it. In other words, at first you confirm visually, but eventually the audio handles almost everything on its own, making the system feel even more intelligent. To me, this is the kind of hidden detail that makes the game special because it seems small in theory, but in practice, it completely changes your flow, confidence, and how you enter every confrontation. In many games, when night falls and you are far from base, it feels like the match has entered a countdown to disaster. Not here. The simple fact that you can sleep outside of a shelter transforms desperation into a choice, and that already makes Road to Vostok much more interesting to me. The strongest aspect is that this mechanic gives the player a freedom that usually doesn't exist in such a tense survival game. Instead of thinking only about getting back alive, you can also think about staying smart. If you carry a pillow, a sleeping bag, or any similar item, that darkness that seemed like the end of your incursion can become just a strategic pause on the way. This gets even better because the game features shelters scattered across the map, so being able to rest outside of them significantly changes your risk assessment and planning during long explorations. For me, this detail makes the experience much more immersive because you stop acting like someone tethered to fixed points on the map and start acting like a real survivor, improvising when the situation gets tight. And the best part is that this isn't a flashy mechanic that the game shoves in your face. It seems small, almost discreet, but when you understand its value, you realize it affects the entire pace of the match. I really like this kind of thing because it's not just useful, it's the type of detail that makes you feel like you're playing smarter than before. You know that moment when you are looting a container in the middle of nowhere, completely stationary and vulnerable, while hearing footsteps in the distance? Well, I didn't know this either, but Road to Vostok has a loophole in the inventory system that can literally save your life. And it's surprisingly simple once you understand what's happening. The game has a very clear logic. When you open the inventory of an external container, your character locks in place. You can't walk, eat, drink, or use any healing items. You stay there, static, like a target waiting for someone to appear. This makes sense from an immersion standpoint. After all, you are physically rummaging through a box. But the problem is that this lock goes beyond the container. It blocks everything, including actions you could do with one hand. This is where the hidden mechanic comes in. If you take the item from the container, close the container, and then open your own inventory, the game no longer locks you in place. You can walk, reposition, leave an open area, and still eat, drink, or medicate at the same time. It is basically the difference between standing still in a danger zone while treating a wound or doing all of that while moving away from a dangerous line of sight. And look, this changes how you think about every loot encounter in the game. Instead of treating the container and inventory as one thing, you start thinking in two distinct moments. Grab fast, close, and then act. Road to Vostok is already a game that doesn't hold your hand, developed by a single person. And mechanics like this show that the game's depth isn't always in the tutorial menus. Sometimes it's hidden in the exact sequence of how you do things. What I find most interesting about this mechanic is that it changes the way you view the map. Vegetation stops being just pretty scenery or improvised cover and becomes a survival tool. When the game makes trees, bushes, and crouched movement actually influence how the AI perceives you, exploration becomes much more tense and intelligent. For me, this is where Road to Vostok starts to feel like a game where observing the environment is worth as much as shooting well. The impact of this on the pace is enormous because you stop playing as if every movement is just a normal transit between point A and point B. Instead of running through open fields, you start to read the terrain, looking for tree lines, shadows, thicker vegetation, and any space that helps break the enemy's line of sight. I really like it when a game does this because it forces you to slow down and think like someone who actually wants to survive, not just someone looking for the next fight. The coolest part is that this mechanic also gives stealth much more weight. It's not that decorative stealth that exists just because every modern game thinks it needs sneakiness. Here, it feels like a real part of the gameplay identity. If moving crouched in vegetation reduces the chance of being spotted so much, then the entire map becomes a sort of tactical puzzle. And that, to me, is one of the coolest things a survival FPS can do. And honestly, I love this kind of detail because it rewards the patient player. Those who enter Road to Vostok thinking they will solve everything with aggression likely suffer more, while those who learn to use the terrain to their advantage start controlling encounters before they even happen. For me, this is a very strong hidden mechanic precisely for that reason. It doesn't seem groundbreaking at first glance, but once you understand its value, the whole game starts to function differently. Many people enter the game thinking that keeping their weapon raised at all times is synonymous with safety, but here the opposite happens. If you live in ADS, aim down sights, your own weapon becomes a problem. And I really like that because it forces the player to abandon that automatic habit of aiming unnecessarily. What makes this mechanic so strong is that it changes how you move between one confrontation and another. You can't treat aiming as if it were a permanent state, because there is a specific arm stamina being drained, and when it's gone, your weapon stability vanishes with it. To me, this makes the game much more tense and interesting, because an ambush isn't just about seeing the enemy first, but also about being physically ready to react when they appear. And the cruelest part, in the best way, is that this mistake usually only becomes obvious at the worst possible moment. You spend too much time aiming or even checking ammo without thinking, and then when the AI suddenly appears, your weapon starts swaying uncontrollably and your reaction simply falls apart. I think it's brilliant when a game punishes this kind of carelessness, not with a message on the screen, but with a real sense of being unprepared, as if the character were telling you, you stayed too tense for too long. To me, the player who understands this mechanic starts playing Road to Vostok in a much smarter way. Instead of living with the gun glued to their face, they raise it only when they really need to and lower it during transitions to preserve control and precision. It's that kind of hidden detail that seems small at first, but later completely changes your posture during exploration. Because you realize that survival doesn't just depend on aiming well, but on knowing exactly when to be ready to aim. Have you ever run like crazy through a forest in Road to Vostok, full of loot, thinking you were getting away clean, and suddenly took a burst of fire from a direction you didn't even expect? It wasn't bad luck. The game's AI was hearing your every step, and your backpack was literally a loudspeaker on your back. The game's weight system doesn't just affect your speed and stamina, it directly affects the volume of the noise you produce when moving. The heavier your backpack, the more noise you make when running. And the AI in Road to Vostok doesn't just react to that noise, it acts based on it. Enemies don't just stay on alert. They reposition, wait, and set up calculated ambushes for when you appear. It's an AI system that punishes those who don't think about true stealth. This is where one of the most underrated tactics in the game comes in, dropping your backpack before entering a serious confrontation. It might seem counterintuitive. You're carrying all your loot, your food, your meds, but in intense combat, carrying all of that is signing your death warrant. Without the backpack, you move faster, make less noise, and stop being a predictable target. The mobility you regain in that moment can be the difference between flanking an enemy or being flanked by them. And the most interesting thing about all this is that this mechanic forces a very real risk and reward decision. You drop the backpack, win the fight, great. But what if you don't make it back? What if you die and someone else takes everything? Road to Vostok is a game made by a single person, but mechanics like this show a level of design that many large studios fail to achieve. The weight of your choices, literally, matters here. Road to Vostok already gives off that survival FPS feel where environment reading and quick reactions matter a lot. So when you disable interpolate and increase exposure, it feels like the whole game becomes clearer, more direct, and more in your control. I like this because it's not an artificial advantage. It's almost like pulling a cloth off the front of the screen and letting the combat respond the way you always wanted it to. What catches my attention most about turning interpolate off is the feeling of immediate control. There are games where you even land the shot, but you feel like the mouse is sliding slightly behind your intention, and that totally breaks confidence in quick exchanges. Here, when you remove that delay, the aim becomes crisper, more honest, and I think that's vital in a game where hesitating for a second can mess up an entire fight. As for high exposure, to me, it's almost a revelation. Instead of relying on the flashlight and risking becoming a walking beacon in the middle of the dark, you start to see better without giving away your position all the time. I really like this type of adjustment because it doesn't make the game easy in a silly way. It just makes you better perceive what was already there. And that totally changes your confidence when searching dark interiors, closed corridors, and suspicious corners. In the end, I think this is one of the strongest tips, precisely because it seems too simple to be so impactful. It's not a rare weapon, it's not secret loot, it's not a fancy trick, it's a setting. But in practice, this type of change affects two huge things at once: the quality of your shooting response and your visual reading of the map. To me, when an adjustment like this clicks, Road to Vostok stops feeling like a heavy, hard-to-read game and starts feeling like a much sharper tool in your hands. In the beginning, I treated time as a background detail, something that happens while you're busy looting and surviving. But time in this game is a tactical tool. And if you aren't using it to your advantage, you are essentially playing on hard mode unnecessarily. The first step is to equip an alarm clock. It sounds silly, but knowing exactly what time it is completely changes how you plan your movements. This is because night and rain aren't just pretty aesthetics in the game, they drastically reduce the visibility of the military. Crossing a controlled zone during the day, under a clear open sky is an invitation to get shot. Making that same move at 2 a.m. during heavy rain, the odds turn completely in your favor. Vostok becomes much more accessible when you learn to read the environment before running out. And when you don't have the right window, the answer isn't to risk it, it's to sleep. Road to Vostok allows you to sleep anywhere you consider safe, using a pillow or sleeping bag. And this passes time intentionally. Prefer something faster? Melatonin does the same job and even restores your mental state. It's the game telling you that patience is a survival skill as important as aim. What impresses me most about this mechanic is how it connects all the other layers of the game. You aren't just waiting, you are planning. You check the clock, monitor the forecast, find a safe corner, sleep, wake up, and execute. It's a real survival routine, and it's incredible that a game developed by a single person can create this kind of behavioral depth where sleeping under a staircase at 11 p.m. can literally be the smartest move you make in an entire session. Vostok erases everything. It's not an exaggeration, not a figure of speech. If you die in there, every item that was in your inventory is gone forever. The shelters remain intact, but everything you were carrying goes with you. This completely changes the mentality you need to have before even thinking about entering that zone. That's why preparation isn't optional. It is the game itself. Go in with a suppressed rifle so as not to draw attention, full armor because one mistake is enough to kill you, and take more meds and tourniquets than you think you'll need, because you will need them. The right window to enter is the same as always. Bad weather, pitch black night, low visibility for the military. You aren't invading Vostok at your best moment. You are taking advantage of the environment's worst moment to make it seem possible. Inside, combat is the real enemy. Every firefight is a gamble where the prize doesn't outweigh the risk. The right move is to go from building to building, use cover, never cross open space unnecessarily, and when it's time to leave, take a completely different route from the one you entered. Whoever saw you go in might already be waiting at the exit. Changing your path isn't paranoia, it's protocol. And when a run like that works, you feel firsthand why Road to Vostok is different. It's not the loot reward that sticks in your memory, it's the tension of every step, knowing that one mistake resets hours of progress. For a game developed by one person, to create a moment with this emotional weight is rare. Vostok isn't just a zone on the map, it's a test of everything you've learned up to that point.